All right, folks, welcome back. In this presentation, we're going into the Scotland, Stirling, Ayr and Glasgow, Part 2. Disclaimer, as always, under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship and research. Once again, this is a summary version of when Scotland was Jewish, and in the description you'll see the links where you can acquire the book. The region of Fife. So in the region of Fife, a very similar pattern emerges amongst names found in trade incorporations and apprenticeship permits. Arnott, Lessels, Davidson, Asiat, Fluker, Simers, Martin, Angel, Porteous, Douglas, Annan, Bone, Hannah, Riddell, Macara, Almano, Pigott, Lowe, Yule, Salmond, and Scobie. Maritime and sailing skills. So the authors also state that the Franco-Spanish Jews brought with them to Scotland valuable maritime and sailing skills, resulting in the Scots trading with ports from the Mediterranean and Caribbean to the American colonies. From the 17th to 19th centuries, we see the following Judeo-Sephardic, Moorish, and Arabic surnames: Alexander, Allison, Bissett, Davidson, Dougal, Gemmell, Hamill, Landells, Moore, Pollock, Paulton, Yule, Sleeman, Spenzia, Caldwell, Cowan, Glaister, Gordon, Jargon, Leon, Nemo, Sharon, Sebaston or Sebastian, and Ur, Gold. Glasgow. Glasgow was established as a royal borough in the 12th century under King David I. Glasgow University was established in the mid-15th century, the fourth oldest in Britain. The authors largely focus on the city's merchant families who made immense profits from trading, banking, and had mercantile connections stretching from Europe to the American colonies. The mercantile shipping trade. So the mercantile shipping trade in Glasgow was described by the book as an oligopoly and overwhelmingly controlled by a handful of very wealthy, powerful families. Their names included Cunninghams, Glassfords, Dunlops, Oswalds, Donalds, Murdocks, Richies, Bogles, Spears, Bisbets, and Riddells. They traded in wine, food, tobacco, sugar, and cotton on both sides of the Atlantic. The Glasgow Arms and Ship Bank. The book goes on to state that the creation of such a vast trading network required a vast amount of resources and contacts spread out amongst the colonial maritime powers. Not everything these trading families got involved in was strictly speaking legal. The authors speculate that the success of these trading networks was built on their collective Jewish roots. The Glasgow Arms and Ship Bank and the Scottish Thistle Bank were founded in the 18th century to help protect and consolidate their trading empires. Merchant family landowners. So marriages were also very insular, and the book states that this was very typical of how Franco-Spanish Jewish families would operate. This helped preserve their wealth, power, identity, and culture. By the mid-18th century, these same merchant families became landowners, which allowed them to control who the teachers and ministers would be for the next generation, and they were either crypto-Jews themselves or closely allied to these families. Leather tanning and sugar trade. So during the American Revolution, the tobacco trade flourished, or floundered, I should say. So the Glasgow merchants turned instead to manufacturing. They also turned to mining operations, such as coal, iron, ore, and pottery clay. The Sephardic Jews and Moors had perfected these industries already in Spain and were very proficient at it. They also went into leather tanning and the sugar trade. A town called Sycharth or Sicket. So these merchants were growing bolder about not hiding their identity, as a town called Sycharth, an hour from Glasgow, is named after a major Jewish holiday. It is also the ancestral home of Clan Campbell of Argyll. And according to the book, Sycharth or Sukkot is also known as the Feast of Tabernacles, a very important and sentimental Jewish holiday. Eiley Campbell of Sycharth. So there were three main ironworks in 18th century Scotland, and two were located around Glasgow, bankrolled by tobacco merchants. The first was created in 1734 and produced various tools, nails, and anvils for the colonial market. The Smithfield Company was established a few decades later, and Ailey Campbell of Succoth, an important MP for Glasgow and advocate, gave parts of the lands from Dalnator to wealthy merchants Peter and George Murdoch and William Cunningham, all of whom had interests in Virginia in the colonies. Virginia seems to come up an awful lot, doesn't it? Maybe we need to look into that. The Muirkirk Iron Company. So the Smithfield Company was later sold to William Dunn, a cotton master, and the Dalnator Company was backed by tobacco merchants. In the late 18th century, the Muirkirk Iron Co. was established, which ran Smithfield and Dalnator, along with the partners of Cramond Iron Co. to secure supplies of cheap bar iron to compete with the Swedish and Russian markets. In the last 3 decades, a close group of tobacco importers almost monopolized the glass industry and a great deal of the coal industry. Vessels from the Clyde. So the majority of Glasgow tobacco houses were linked to suppliers of sugar, rum, and molasses in North America. Vessels from the Clyde went straight to the Caribbean, then to the colonies. The grain market was also highly lucrative, or the grain market. Neil Jameson conducted a lot of trade in the area of lumber and wine. He also financed shipbuilding operations and was involved in the salt trade between France and Maine. The main market for the Sephardic Scottish tobacco traders was their prior home of France, making them extremely wealthy. Securing credit. So, with the credit crisis of 1772, Sir Robert Herries, the French buyer, was welcomed warmly by the Clyde traders. 10 years prior, it had been hard to secure credit and sales were slow, but William Alexander and Sons advanced cash for customs duties to Lawson, Semple and Co. The most prized assets of 18th century business were contacts, connections, and reputation. Well, imagine it's the same nowadays as well. The Glasgow tobacco family. So, the Glasgow tobacco trading families easily secured credit from other parts of the UK or Europe thanks to their network and influence. The Bogles, for example, were able to borrow large sums from London in the 1720s due to their father's credit status, and James Lawson was able to secure large sums from merchants in Liverpool, Bristol, and London. The shofar, or the ram's horn. So, the ram's horn, or shofar, has special importance to Jewish people as it calls them to worship and reminds them of God. The authors state that it is that it is in perfect keeping with tradition that a Jewish temple would be called a ram's horn, and it is located on Ingram Street in Glasgow's Merchant City. It was established in the early 18th century for the city's merchants. Even the ministers were crypto Jews. Well, hands up who's surprised. Old Testament in character. So I actually, look at it. It even looks like a synagogue. The original building had to be replaced in 1828 to a large extent, and now it is owned by the university after the congregation effectively died out. However, the stained glass windows are still very Old Testament in character. The authors state that the cemetery is the most remarkable part of the church these days, as there are no upright or Christian headstones and no crosses at all. The images on the markers are the Book of Life and the Tree of Life, very Hebrew in flavour. John Cohen. So, the authors of the book visited Stirling in 2002 and describe two discoveries. The first being Cohen's Hospital, founded in the 17th century with money left by the merchant John Cohen, whose surname stemmed from the name Cohen, referencing the Jewish priesthood from Moses' time. The hospital was used to accommodate local guild members for free, which was standard practice amongst Jews, and gave generously to widows, orphans, pensioners, young unmarried women in need of a dowry, and the needy. Cowan's Hospital. So there were many examples of such hospitals all across what the book describes as the Sephardic diaspora in Europe. The Scottish Presbyterian Church seems to have been founded along similar principles, as it elected its own elders, chose its own ministers, cared for the poor and the sick, looked after orphans, and even provided poor young women with dowries if they wanted to get married. In the mid-18th century, there were examples of similar hospitals and orphanages which greatly helped the lives of Sephardic Jews in London, similar to Cowan's Hospital in Stirling. In fact, I believe my own maternal grandfather was an elder in the Church of Scotland, if I remember right. Trade with the Low Countries. So Cowan was born in the late 16th century. His father was a wealthy merchant and burgess. The book describes Cowan's shop as being the Harrods of the day, quote directly from the book, as John inherited his father's commercial empire after he passed away. Cowan was a strict landlord as well as a businessman. He was a member of the town council, as well as being the chief banker and moneylender, a member of the Scots Parliament at one time, and conducted trade with the Low Countries. On top of all that, he was also a privateer.
Pirate, nay, privateer, on a sanctioned mission under the authority and protection of the Crown.